Welcome to the Demeere podcast. We talk about martial arts, self-defense, and a whole lot more. And now, your host, Demeere.
Hi guys, and welcome to episode 40 of the podcast. And I've got a really good one for you today. It's an interview with Marc MacYoung. But before we get started, a quick shout out to one of my patrons, as Kathy Davidson Gardner. Kathy has been my patron for about a year now, and I just want to say a huge thanks to you, Kathy, for your support, and of course that of all my other patrons as well. It's thanks to you guys that I can make the podcast. So again, thank you for your support. And if you, dear listener, want to support the podcast as well, it's very easy. Go to patreon.com/Wim Demeere, my name, links in the show notes, and then you can find out all the goodies we have over there. Now, for this episode, it's a pretty long interview I did with Marc. There's this one here, but there is also a bonus episode on Patreon. Again, the link will be in the show notes, as well as with all the other links of the things that Marc and I discuss during this episode. So you go to wimsblog.com/40, so 40 the number, and then you'll find everything there. So without further delay, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I've got an amazing guest today, the one and only Marc MacYoung. Marc, how are you doing?
Pretty good, thank you. You make me sound really special there.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have my moments of introduction that I can, lead in a guest like a ta-da, fanfare and drum rolls, but, I don't have the band, so it's just me, man. I have to set the scene here. So before we go on... Go ahead.
Symbols? A pair of finger symbols would do.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So you're my first guest in my series, and I didn't mention this before we got started, so you don't know. In 2 weeks, as we're recording this, in 2 weeks, it'll be 20 years that I started my first website. So.
Wow. Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And my blog now, wimsblog.com, is actually the kind of what that transformed into over the years. And we actually met online like that. And it was, I'm not sure if you remember it, but I remember really well. What happened is that, and this just goes to show how old we are and how things changed, is that I sent you an email to ask you, hello, Mr. MacYoung, would it be good or okay for you if I put a link to your website on my website? So people were polite back in the day because nobody knew how the internet thing was going to play out. So everybody was, at that stage, pretty friendly. And that's how we got in touch the first time. Mm-hmm. So a long time, and then we met in Germany the first time when you did a seminar there, and I think it was in Cologne, but I'm not sure anymore.
I remember that. I also remember the guy who was trying to punch you there. That was a bad idea, or was that at another?
No, that was the second seminar. I don't remember where that one was. It was also in Germany, but he was he didn't understand what he was doing, and he was trying to. He was cruising for a bruising, as you guys like to say, and he didn't even understand what was going on. And I eventually went to the host organizer and said, look, this is what the guy's doing. It's going to end badly. I'm fed up. I just want to work with somebody else. Guy didn't get it. He never got it. To the best of my knowledge, he's still doing the same stupid shit to other people, or maybe he's been punched in the face a few times. Yeah,
maybe somebody else around punched him. By the way, as I'm talking, I have a very insistent monster here, who will occasionally show up. So if something very large and polka dotted cruises by the screen,
that's okay.
I have not been eaten. It's just, but he can be rather insistent.
No.
27 pounds of cat is
that's a
very
lot.
Capable. Yeah, it's a lot of cat. And when he gets insistent, he gets insistent. But you run into those kind of guys in seminars, and you always have to wonder, are they, that was interesting, are they stupid, are they malicious, or do they just not get it?
I think it's often a combination of all of those, and, the levers are pushed one way or the other in those three different aspects.
You're not wrong.
Speaking of, long time ago. So it wasn't long after that I invited you to Belgium for hosting a seminar. And we went to the city of Leuven, which for the people who don't know.
I remember Leuven. Yes.
That is a university city. And,
yes. And we discussed a wall, as a matter of fact, that had 500 years of drunk students.
Yes. And that is where my daughter, who wasn't born at the time, studies now. That's her second year of college. So we are officially old. You've got gray in your beard, and so do I.
We're old.
I think we're gonna have to grow up.
If I've gone this long without growing up, I'm not gonna. Just accept it. I refuse. By that, I remember walking through Leuven and seeing Stella Artois, and asking about it and discovering that it is the Coors of Belgium, the college student beer, the cheap beer, and then coming here to the United States, it came and it's like, Belgian beer, and they are so impressed with it.
Well, I mean, Belgian beer is awesome. Obviously, I have to say that, but not Stella. Stella is like, what people forget is that the brewery, Interbrew, it's actually from Leuven. So that's where it comes from. So they have like pretty much a pipeline straight to the marketplace where you have all the bars. But it's
in other words.
I'm not going to say it's the worst beer in the world. I wouldn't say that, obviously, but there are far better ones than Stella Artois.
Yes, I know. And the one thing I love German beer, and then I went to Belgium, and it was like,
there you go.
I'm in love.
Well, I've got a bunch of questions, so we're going to start with some of them, and then for the folks listening, so we are going to do a bonus episode on my Patreon with Mark, where he's going to take a bunch of questions from my patrons, and I've got a series of really good questions that I think you've never been asked before. At the very least, I haven't heard you answer them, so I think that's going to be awesome. But first, speaking of older stuff, I think pretty much every single one of your old Paladin Press books are now available on Amazon. Is that correct?
Most of them. There's a translation process from paperback into ebook, and that is a booger. When Paladin closed the doors, they sent us the books, most of them.
Yeah.
And the translation from that format to a workable format has, shall we say, proven problematic.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, one of them is that I just sat down and typed the entire book in, and that was easier and faster.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah. The other thing along those lines is we got them re-released, and that is really wonderful. And, talking about feeling old when you're talking about a 30th anniversary of a book.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm going to be doing, and it's like in all my copious free time, is taking the old books and say, hey, this is what I said back then. This is what I understand now, or how I've changed my mind.
Yeah.
Right. And then the final one, how things have changed.
Yeah.
So not saying, well, I am in some cases saying, yeah, I got this one wrong. I admit it. But also the differences between then and now.
Yeah, that was actually one of my next questions for you, because I had the same thing. So when Paladin Press closed down, I got the rights to one of my books, and I had to go over everything, and then pretty much the same experience. Like, okay, I wrote this many years ago. I would have written it differently today, and I'm sure that if I would have written it 20 years in the future, it wouldn't be the same book either. So. How do you deal with that when you just from a purely emotional standpoint, are you like going duh and just thumping your head on the desk a few times, or how do you handle that?
Well, first of all, we grow and we change, and it's important to realize how much that happens. And I mean, it's a really sobering thought that when Bruce Lee was my age, he'd been dead for 30 years. Right?
Alrighty.
So we never got to see him change in advance.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times I've looked at what I wrote and I understand that was the mindset I was at the time. That was my understanding of at the time. But if you don't have deeper understanding as you grow older, I mean, you're not growing.
Yeah.
So it's less about me being wrong, and this also has another factor, which is my writing has never been about me. It's always been about helping people survive out there.
Yeah.
So if I find information, oops, this was incorrect, then I don't really have problems saying I was wrong because it's not about me, it's about you.
Yep.
You know, and that is, I'm sending people into dangerous situations, places where they could get killed if they have bad information. So trying to give them the best information I can at any time is way more important than my pride of like, well, I said it, it's got to be right. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So that's not much of a bone for me. Right. It's like, okay, fine, I can do it.
Yeah. For me, it's one of those issues that I was fortunate to learn early on because I had the extreme good fortune that Lauren Christensen took me under his wing when I started writing.
Yeah.
And he very quickly, made me understand that, okay, so you don't write stuff as absolute, like this is how it is and there's no other way. Right. Because First of all, I mean, what if you're wrong? And then you look like an idiot. But on the other hand, that's just not how life works. And one of his pet peeves is that when somebody says, oh, that wouldn't work in the street. And he's like, really? So have you tried it? Have you been there every single time that somebody tried this or did something similar, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you're sure it wouldn't work? Who the hell are you? And I like to say, who made you Ares, god of war? That you know everything about violence and that nobody else could be, have a different view or different techniques that they can make work, but that you totally suck at.
I'm going to steal that Ares God of War. I mean, that just so you know, I'm stealing that. But the idea is also, so much of this is, does it work? I mean, the first question is, do the physics work?
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times when people say, oh, that wouldn't work, it's like, well, if the physics are there, it will work. If the physics aren't there, it won't work. Now, that's not the same thing as not working in the street.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you get into the actual, what are the dynamics of a street situation? And then ask yourself, is this the appropriate move for those circumstances?
Yeah. Yeah, it's totally different story.
Right. And I mean, when somebody says, oh, it doesn't work in the streets, they're talking about this giant overarching, and it's like, you know what? That works very, very well against a drunk in a bar.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't work so well when somebody's trying to stick a knife in your guts.
Mm.
So, the Ares God of War thing is, so you can say that this will categorically not work under any circumstances. No, you've drank the Kool-Aid. This is not a good answer.
Yeah, and then we get to, and that's I wanted to talk about this a little bit just because you mentioned it, that life has changed. A lot has changed in society. In many ways, violence also changed. And for instance, what I see now, we have the internet wisdom or internet knowledge people out there, and heaven forbid the YouTube and Facebook experts that they've just become increasingly popular. And when I talk about this, and I was recently talking about this kind of stuff with somebody that I train, and I said, look, when I mention this, people think that I'm jealous. And I said, I'm not. That's not the issue. I've got a full-time job. Anything I do online is actually in addition to what I do for a living. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm fine with people having tremendous success. My point is that when they have tremendous success by categorically stating like, okay, this is the best technique ever and beat any attacker in under 3 seconds and this is the only knife defense you only need to know. I'm like, okay, I understand this is marketing, it sells, but like you said, you're putting people in danger. And I had one. Well, if I just, I'll finish this one. One incident, a guy, he's got over 1 million subscribers on YouTube right now. And many years ago, I wrote about him on my blog, and he showed a knife defense. Right? Guy pulls a knife, and he does an outside crescent kick to kick it out of the guy's hand. And I was like, I don't think that's such a great idea for this and this and this reason. And he actually showed up on my blog and commented. And his reasoning was, well, anything is better than nothing. That's what I'm paraphrasing, but that was his reasoning. And I'm like, I don't think so. I very much disagree with that. If you don't have a good answer, why would you just make one up? Why would you just like, well, I think this will work and this and that, and it's either that or dying. No. That's a false dilemma. Nobody limited it to those two choices except you, because you want to defend yourself for why you made this video.
Well, and I mean, it's really simple. If you do it, I mean, let us say theoretically that there is a knife defense that is guaranteed.
Yeah.
Okay, theoretically. I mean, reality is no. Yeah. Reality is no such thing. Well, one of the most reliable defenses against a knife is to turn and run fiercely.
Yep.
Okay. And even that's not guaranteed, but it's got the highest result rate. The people who are looking for, there's an old saying which is rush a gun, run from a knife.
Yeah.
Right. Now, and I mean that is kind of vague, and there's some issues involved with it. But basically, you don't want to jump into a weed whacker.
Yeah.
You don't want to fight a weed whacker. There are strategies, let's call them, that tend to work well with a knife. And at the end of the day, though, when people say expect to get cut, they're setting people up to try and fight a weed whacker.
Yeah.
When I tell people trade a cut for a kill, I'm talking about if you have to go in. And that is a very big, flashing neon light if. Trade the cut for a kill.
Yeah.
Which means as you're slamming his skull into the concrete, there's a good chance you'll get cut. But he's incapable of proceeding. Right? And that is an accepting it, but it's not standing there and trying to fight, because the longer you try and fight this guy, the more cuts you're going to take.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, something is better than nothing. If it's wrong, because if you're trying to fight a knife, fight being a drawn out contest, you're going to get carved like a turkey, right? Or ham, Christmas ham, or whatever it is you guys do over there. But the idea of something is better than nothing is, no, if you have a stupid approach.
Yeah.
No, that's not true.
Yeah.
If you really want you want the most effective response, which is if you don't have anything better, and by that I mean really better, run.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that's on the table too, guys. But the kicking a knife out of the hand, it shows that you want to stay there and fight.
Yeah.
Which is not. You don't ever fight against the knife.
And the thing I often say about, in that context is like, because people will bring it up, I am sure that you can come up with a scenario in which you can't run. I am certain we can devise a scenario or a context in which either you can't run quickly enough, or you have to get through the guy first, or this or that. I'm sure we can get that. But I am confident that in the majority of the cases, actually running might be easier than you might suspect. At the minimum, creating the situation in which you can run will be easier to do than standing there and facing the guy and, like you say, step straight into that weed whacker.
Yeah. See, I can run the worst case scenario when it comes to running is that I have to climb over the guy to run.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, that's one of those things of, I use the fluffy cat analogy, and to tell you, back when I was in my fighting prime, and I was, right? I was a true badass piece of real estate. One of the worst maulings I ever had in my life is I'd had a hard day at work. I come home, I'm taking a hot bath, I'm relaxing, I'm smoking a cigar, I'm just kicking back, and the cat pops over the edge of the tub and like, that's disgusting, right? And it's like, go away, man. I don't need your judgment, right? So and she jumps up on the edge of the tub because obviously I'm not listening to her. She's going to tell me how disgusting. She starts walking down the edge of the tub and she slips and falls in. Right?
Ow.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. I think I use a few other words. Well, she came up and got out of the tub on the only form of traction she had, me.
Yeah.
Right? So I stand up and I am bleeding.
Yeah.
Right? The bath water is pink. Right? And despite all of my skills, when that cat wanted to go, that cat was getting out of there. So, when I tell people Fluffy the cat, right, that four-wheel drive of getting out of there, people, that's the problem, because what they'll do is they'll come forward and stop and try and fight.
Yeah. Rather
than being like a cat trying to escape and climbing over somebody. That causes a lot of damage. I can speak from experience on that. But again, it's like, run away. Well, what if you're cornered? You can climb over him.
Yeah.
Right? You can take a cut and climb over him. Now, and, this is the whole thing of people when they ask these what-if monkeys, which, by the way, it has always bothered me that what-if monkeys translates to whim.
I know.
I'm really sorry about that, man.
My revenge will be sweet.
Okay, I can live with that. But, these guys paint these incredibly complex and stupid scenarios, right? And I call them 27 ninja situations. Well, what if I'm walking down a dark alley and I got $20 bills hanging out of my pockets and 27 ninjas with Uzis jump me? What do? You die. What were you doing in the alley in the first place?
Yeah.
Right. And that is the big thing of the, we do need to work with scenarios. We do need to come up with ideas of, okay, how do you handle this problem? But those have to be guided. They have to be realistic.
Yeah, and you have to build up to that. You don't start with a Kobayashi Maru scenario to teach somebody a lesson. That's not training. That's indoctrination, and that's beating people down. There's no point.
Well, the other thing is, so many of these people who ask me about these, Kobayashi Maru scenarios, and for those who are not Star Trek fans, that is a no-win scenario.
Yeah.
When they come up with these, how many of these people cannot effectively block an attack? Let's say, you're a big boy, okay, and you've got the extra nastiness of extremely good training and structure. Okay, so it's not an exaggeration that saying getting hit by you is like getting hit by a freight train.
I do Tai Chi. I'm soft.
I know. It's just this and you remember my comment about Tai Chi, right?
Yep.
Martial arts with the horns taken off. It's still the 2,000 pound bull without the horns, and that bull's going to crush you, right? So, yeah, soft, yeah. But let us say you take away your structure and your alignment, which is really a big a big part of why you're so damn dangerous. But if just by your size alone, if you were to try and hit somebody hard with muscle, yeah, remember heading that way? I know it's long in the past, but their mechanics would collapse against that kind of hit.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, forget the Kobayashi Maru. How about we just work on you not getting your nose driven through the back of your skull when you get hit by a bigger guy?
Yeah.
Right. So again, that's the imagination, is like, you don't have the skills to be worrying about that yet.
Yeah, exactly. And the one time I saw it done really well, in my opinion, was last time we all went to Peyton Quinn's ranch in the mountains, and he did a couple scenarios, and it was just firearms training. But these are all scenarios taken from real cases, so things that actually happened that he then recreates in the scenario. And there was one, and that is actually a Kobayashi Maru. It's where a guy is confronting you, and you feel maybe in danger, but it's the guy coming behind him that is apparently his buddy, who takes the gun out of the guy's waistband in back, and as he steps behind, he fires.
Yeah.
Human reaction time being what it is, there's no way you can win except when you shoot the guy before you have legal reason and justification to use lethal force. And I remember Peyton saying that, well, there was one guy who beat the scenario, but he just killed 2 people.
Yeah.
He was too soon. I mean, if you make a video of that, the only thing you see is a guy assassinating 2 people. It's not self-defense. Now, we can talk about that, but I think that's a good example of, it can get really complex. Yes, we can find scenarios, and obviously in real life as well, where it's incredibly difficult to get out of that, but you don't start there. That's the end point. Go for the difficult stuff later. Start with basics. Start with stuff that is, high percentage, and then we can talk about the exceptions and the variations and nuances as you progress. Yes. But it takes time.
All right, I'm going to share with you something Genevieve and I came up with, and it's not out yet.
Ooh, scoop.
Ooh, yeah, you're getting a scoop here. One of the things what we've talked about is, well, jokingly we call it the funnel of doom.
Nice.
Right. But the idea is, if you take early on in a situation, you have time and you have many different options.
Yeah.
Right. Now, first understand, this stuff is a process. It's got stages, it has developmental, etc., and it's got a timeline. So up here, if you get a hold of it, you get a situation where you have many choices, many options. As it progresses, effective options narrow, and you get to a choke point, and at that choke point is what I call the point of no return.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, here's the thing. Past this, you're done. Stick a fork in you, you're done. The analogy we use is being thrown out of a plane.
Yeah.
All right. Immediate threat is the guy trying to throw you out of the plane, whereas the prosecutor is going to try and tell you that there's no immediate. He's going to try and say that there's no immediate threat until the last 10 feet.
Yeah.
Right. A defense attorney will say, "Oh yeah, immediate threat is right after you've been thrown out the door." Right? It's like, no, you're missing the point. There's a point of no return where you go out that door, and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
where you are in this process, the danger's here. This is what you have to stop.
Yeah.
And the scenario getting closer and closer. Self-defense is just before the choke point, the point of no return.
Yeah.
Because what happens afterwards, it's out of your hands.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you can explain that process, right? If you can explain, and I mean, realistically, when the reason I had the expression I did when you said that, first of all, understand there are no win situations. There are situations, if it gets to this point,
Yeah.
you've lost. And that is wildly different than Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah.
Right? That, so by here it's not a Kobayashi Maru. Here, if you let it get to this point, it is a Kobayashi Maru.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing of, while standing there and like going back to Peyton's scenario, which it does happen. I mean, these guys work together. This is why, because it works, is why they do it.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're facing one guy and the other guy's coming up, right, if you know beforehand, there's a really good chance these guys are working together.
Yeah.
And you move to a position where in order for this to work, this guy's got to take extra steps. That's where you go, okay, now I know they're working together.
Yeah.
Right. So, again, what was Kirk's answer to the Kobayashi Maru?
Cheat. You have to cheat.
Yes, he reprogrammed the computer, the simulation. Yeah, and that's exactly it. See? So yeah, the answer to Kobayashi Marus are to cheat, but you got to know beforehand how to cheat.
Well, I like that idea of the funnel of doom. I actually use something very similar as a personal trainer when people are injured, and I'll quickly explain that. What I say is that, look, okay, you've got a knee injury. At this stage of seriousness of the injury, we've got X, Y, and Z possibilities of fixing that. That could be rehab, could be simply be rest, could be, some medication, could be a bunch of things. Let's say you do none of that. Maybe it heals, probably not. In the meantime, it gets gradually worse, and other parts of your body will be affected. Your gait changes, so that means that your other leg has to compensate. And then very slowly, muscles that normally are used for stabilizing, they will have to move parts, and muscles that need to move parts will be used to stabilize stuff. So the internal coordination of your body starts to unravel. And you can still do stuff then. But you're starting to take some damage in wear and tear, and at that point you're passing the first point of no return. You're not dead yet, but it's starting to suck a little bit, and then that keeps going on. And eventually you always get these several points of no return. That every time you pass one of those, all the therapies that we could do beforehand, most of them are gone.
Right.
And then you get a little bit further, and then it's okay, we can still do stuff, but the consequences get bigger. Now you're going to have to stay home for a month. Now you can't walk on that leg anymore for a month. And then you ignore that still, more damage, and then you get to the point, now you need surgery. And you finally get to the point of, we can't help you anymore. You're beyond help. It's kind of a similar thing to what you said.
Yeah, it is exactly. And by the way, there's a brilliant comparison. And it's a great explanation for this, that the longer you, and it's not just that these points here, we actually blow past them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The speed at which that goes is another conversation topic.
Right.
Because all the factors involved with how fast you go through that process, that's very different. Same thing with you. You could blow past all the stages and get straight to the choke point, or you can go forward and backwards and up and down a little bit depending on bunch of stuff.
And here you've got the choice of options, and that's the you said the consequences, and I was thinking consequences is true. That's a good choice, but valid options dwindle. I mean, options that'll work, but also the commitment that it takes to fix it goes up. So it's not just consequences, but it's what is required for it to work. Now, that's a situation that you really, people want the lowest, shall we say, commitment, lack of a better word, investment. Okay. They want, the people who are coming up with these, Kobayashi Marus are also looking for the lowest investment answer possible.
And then, and then it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not going to work. But the people who want those options that are the lowest investment also often are not interested in investing in developing the skills, capabilities to be able to handle that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really unrealistic for them to want an answer other than running fiercely with their level of commitment, investment, and skills.
Yeah, it's I was I've been teaching mixed martial arts for a while now. My son is interested, so we've been training a lot lately, and we had a summer break, so we go to the attic on the mats and then we do grappling. He's 17. I'm not going to say he weighs half what I weigh, but I'm significantly heavier than him, and I've got 30 plus years of training and experience on him as well. So I try to show him that, look, I'm letting you do a lot of stuff that wouldn't work because I weigh too much and I'm too strong. That if I just use strength and my weight, you won't get out of this position. But I cannot take away those factors. Well, my weight, I can't do that. My strength, I can mitigate a little bit the result of that. So I don't use brute strength on you. Now, what you should understand is that just because when you try technique on me to get me, I'm in side control and you want to get out of there, fine. If it doesn't work, it's not necessarily because you did it wrong. It's possible that it's just because I'm too heavy and you can't really get the same thing going as if you were working with somebody your size, your strength, your age, then it would be different. And he got a great example of that on Monday. Is that one of the previous classes he managed to tap one of my heavyweights. So and he just crawled all over him, choked him, and he had to tap. And then on Monday, that heavyweight just grabbed him, yanked him to the floor, and put him in a chokehold. And he and my boy had to tap. I said, look, that's what I mean. Yeah. That's the exact thing. The skill level that it takes for you to overcome the odds, a stronger guy, an older guy, a bigger guy, and so on. That skill level, that disparity, that's what you train for eventually, bit by bit, to get higher on that level, so that you can handle yourself against bigger, stronger guys who are also trained and who are ready to fight and committed and so on. But that takes time. That's my point anyway. That I want to say is that you don't start there. You work your way up to that.
Right, and that really is. There is so much you don't know what you're going to run across out there.
Yeah.
Right, and most people freak out about that. Yeah. Well, fact of the matter is, even though you can truly say that you don't know what you're going to run into, there are categories of what you will run across.
Yep.
And if you train to handle the category, you have an advantage over people who don't.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So yes, going up against a big guy with no training, or who just is using size and strength, certain things will work against that. Certain things will not work. You need to know the difference there.
Yeah.
Right. And you need to know which tool to use for that situation. What tools work best in these categories?
Yep.
And then that having a toolbox with those various, and I mean, part of this, and this is where people talk about analysis paralysis, yada, 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 yada. I dislike that idea, because if you know when and where to use these tools, automatically, a huge toolbox, a section of your toolbox is out of play. Yeah. Because that's not the job you're doing.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, so it's limited options that are viable options, and know how to use them.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to change gears a little bit. So we talked a little bit about all your older books that are back on Amazon, and also how things changed. But I also want to talk about pretty much what I think is your latest book. And that is obviously, again, for everybody, I will put all the links in the show notes so you can go directly on Amazon and find what I'm talking about. But that's the latest book. Is you wrote that together with Jenna Meek, and it's What You Don't Know Can Kill You, How Most Self-Defense Training Will Put You into Prison or the Ground. And I really liked that. And with your permission, I'll give a little bit of an introduction, and that is,
Go ahead.
The book starts pretty much with the story of Tyler, and I'm going to very quickly tell
Poor
that
Tyler.
poor Tyler, because there are several Tyler stories in the book, so I'm not giving too much away. Pretty much, he's been training for a long time. He's got equipment and this and that, and all of a sudden, one night there's a lot of noise in the park nearby. Sees a bunch of people there, and he decides to go outside. But just to be sure, he takes one of his toys, quote unquote, along with him. Long story short, there's two groups of teenagers getting into it, and Tyler's like, you guys gotta get out of here. I live nearby. They don't listen to his absolute authority. They don't understand how awesome he is.
Yes.
And he ends up fighting them. And a little bit later, the police shows up, and obviously everybody gets arrested. And it turns out that Tyler is then going to get pretty much the short end of the stick, because he is charged with attempted murder because he went outside of his house armed to confront a group of people. And
Left his property too.
Yep. And he left his property. He's got $10,000 worth of legal bills, and he eventually goes to jail. His girlfriend's gone, everything's gone, he's back with his parent. And what I really liked is that you said, to his dying day, Tyler remains convinced he went to jail for defending himself.
Yes.
And that is the segue into, what this book is all about, is just avoiding that kind of stuff. So could you talk a little bit about the book, what your goal was for writing it, how it got started?
That's going to take a second of background story.
Okay.
And defining a problem that people don't realize is there, much less that it's a problem. And one of the things we did in WDP, that's the short version of what you know and say, we call it WDP.
Yeah.
Is we talk about that there's a difference between martial arts and self-defense. Those two are not synonymous terms.
Yeah.
A lot of people think they are. Self-defense is a very specific topic, and it can be divided into three main parts. There is the physical, right? But there's the build-up, and then there's the aftermath. And most training only focuses on the physical.
Yeah.
That is they drill deep into this. All these scenarios that we were just talking about, they don't understand how crime and violence happens. That's the buildup. Now, the reason the three stages is important is what happens before is going to affect what happens here in the physical. This goes back into like identifying the type of danger you're in. What is the appropriate response at this level of danger? Then there comes the aftermath. And for most people, and especially nowadays with as many cameras that are out there, there's going to be a legal aftermath.
Yeah.
And most instructors, we teach that too, and they just give you a hand wave. Yeah, just go on through. We teach that. Yeah. And then they spend the entire class talking about the physical stuff. Right? Now, the idea of what you can do here, first of all, to just completely avoid it, is really important. And then comes recognizing the level of danger. See, another problem with martial arts being presented as self-defense is martial arts is actually defined. Most martial arts focuses on what could be called fighting.
Yeah.
Now, fighting is not self-defense. Self-defense is legal. Fighting is illegal. So if you're engaged in a fight, they're going to arrest you. If you defend yourself and you can explain why it was self-defense, you have a better chance of not being arrested. Now, take a mixed martial arts match. Take away the gloves and put them in street clothes. Put that into a bar.
Yep.
Video camera. That's what the video camera sees. What do you call that?
It's a fight. That's a bar brawl.
Yeah, it's a brawl. It's a fight. It's illegal. You're going to get arrested.
Yeah.
So, the training without the context of when to use it is a fiasco. And that's what we wanted to address in WDP. It's all the other stuff you need to know about for self-defense. And it really has no physical techniques. Dear old Tyler, poor Tyler. And by the way, all of those Tyler stories are based on actual stories that I know about. They happened.
Yeah.
Right. The guy who, there was a fight at the park at the end of the street. He went outside, right? He left his property. And there's a legal concept, and my Latin sucks, so I'm not going to say it. But it basically, the thing speaks for itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's a locura summa, whatever. I lied. I am going to try it. Basically, what it is, it's a legal concept. Excuse me. It's a legal concept that basically, once you do this, let's do it. Once you do this, it invalidates your claim of self-defense.
Yep.
Because you're no longer defending yourself. You made the choice to go engage.
Yeah. And just, to interrupt you just for a little bit, but what many people don't understand, and obviously they're emotionally invested and all that kind of stuff, is that at that stage, anything you do afterwards is you cannot no longer make the claim of self-defense. And especially if you're successful, if you beat the other guy or you beat him up a little bit and so on, they stay stuck in that phase beforehand and that feeling of being justified in defending themselves. And they do not understand that once you cross that specific threshold, well, it invalidates that claim. Yes, but no, you went too far. Yes, but no, there is no yes, but you went too far. You crossed the line and you cannot uncross it.
And understand that line can be your property line.
Yep.
It's not just like some, moralistic, etc. No, it's a pretty solid, the surveyor says your property stops right here.
Yeah.
And you leaving that property, and there's a term that is in Texas, in pursuit of a quarrel.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good term.
I'm going to go talk to my neighbor, and just to be sure, I'm going to take a gun with me. No. And Tyler didn't take a gun, but the idea of the people, as you say, are so self-righteous, they're convinced they're justified.
Yeah. And
they don't understand that in legal terminology, justified means something completely different.
Yeah.
See, justified to an average person means, it was right for me to do that. In legal terms, justification means providing the evidence, the good and legal reason for what you did.
Yeah.
Which lawyers twitch every time I say this, but it's an easy way for laymen to understand it. When you claim self-defense, the burden of proof shifts to you to prove that it was self-defense.
Yep.
Right. The correct term is production of evidence, but you have to explain how it was self-defense.
Yep. And all your actions need to be consistent with that claim.
Yes. And that's something that, when we wrote WDP, it was to introduce people to this concept of how this action here before physical is going to totally blow your self-defense claim to the cops and the courts.
Yeah. Yeah, and just before we started recording, I quickly took a look at one of the negative reviews on Amazon of the book, and I was like, you are the person who needs to read the book. Clearly, yes, by what you write as a critique, you completely missed what you just here explained here, Mark, is that, okay, this is what it's about. You miss the purpose of the book, and you're focusing on the wrong things. Like, okay, you buy a hammer and then you try to screw in a nail. No, that's not what it's for. It's a different tool.
And I mean, so many people, this is one of those issues where I am 59 years old, and there is no point in my life where I do not remember being engaged in violence, fighting, dealing with the, people hunting me, researching the subject, training for the subject, looking into the legal stuff, and, dealing with the cops in the aftermath. I mean, this has been my entire life, right? I may have learned a thing or two, right? And yet these guys who show up with well, so-and-so says, somebody is giving them a simplistic answer.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, me talking about all these complexities, right? It's like, oh, you guys don't know what you're talking about. What it really is this. And how long have you been training? Oh, I've been training for 3 years. And after 3 years, you're an expert in this field, huh?
Yeah. I just posted that on my Facebook page. I've got my mixed martial arts channel and so on, MMA Formula. And I posted a video from, how did this guy manage to knock out that guy in a fight recently?
Mm-hmm.
And
I saw that. Yeah.
One guy commented on that, and he says, yeah, you should research this guy's fighting style. He's going to be champion and this and that, and he's underrated. And I'm like, okay, so it's Muslim Stalikov, and he's a Sancho fighter. I was a Sancho fighter. I did, I wasn't the best in the world, but I did okay. I did pretty good. I got a box of medals. I actually saw him fight before anybody knew about him in the UFC, let alone most people in the United States didn't even know about him. And I was national coach for that sport in my country. Please tell me again that I need to study this guy. And then he said something that was wrong. I said, and I tried to stay very polite, obviously. And I was like, okay, there's a lost art in today's world, and that is before you comment on something, look up who the hell you're talking to. And because that saved my bacon many times. I was like, I was going to say something like, okay, who the hell is this guy? Ooh, no, okay, he does know what he's talking about. Let me read again. Yeah, okay, I think I see the nuance now, or the focus that he's using for saying this particular thing. And then I stopped myself. We call it over here, you want to avoid missing a chance to shut up. So yes. Please take that chance. And people should do that more often.
Well, and again, it's understanding the depth of this subject and the complexity of it.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, one of the things you and I have talked about is when your focus is this, and I mean, the mixed martial arts focus, what works in the ring, what is very, very effective in the ring, and yet all the variation within that ring.
Yeah.
You and I have had this discussion about, the street or self-defense versus what works in the ring and the strategies and how that affects what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
Right.
I separate them completely, and that's what many people don't understand, is that I teach combat sports like mixed martial arts. I've been doing that for decades, but I also teach traditional martial arts, and I teach pure self-defense systems. And a lot of people have an issue with me seeing that as three separate things. And for the life of me, I can't understand why that is problematic. I think that makes the most sense is that for a given context or environment, you use a specialized system. Like,
Well, yeah, a system that's tailored for the problems of
exactly.
that subject.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a Venn diagram here just waiting, you know,
Yep.
take what you said. Yeah, there is a certain degree of overlap, but you need to understand this subject, this subject, this subject are all unique subjects.
Yeah.
And you understand that, then you can begin to understand the overlap.
Yeah. And
where
I'm going to quickly harp on my pet peeve, and that's Randy's Law. So Randy is a friend of Mark, for those who don't know, and it's many, many, many years ago. Randy made this offhand comment, and I'm not going to introduce it again. People look up Randy's Law on my blog, and you'll read all about it. But point is that the differences are just as important as the similarities. And people look at that Venn diagram. Okay, where's the overlap? And then they say, that's it. That's the gold. That's what we need. No. You need to understand the entire Venn diagram, not just the overlap.
Right.
Everything. Where does the overlap start? Where does it end? And why? And that's a totally different thing.
Right. Well, let's take just a regular punch.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that a sports move? Is that a self-defense move? Is that an abusive move? I mean, if especially you were to hit like an 80-year-old woman, right, that would be that same punch that you threw hundreds of times in the ring.
Yeah.
Would be a crime.
Yep.
So it's the context of what it is using. So yeah, the overlap is special. I mean, this is one thing that I tell people, that I like BJJ for when you need to apply BJJ in a situation. It is when you are trying to control somebody without injuring them.
Yeah.
And I think the stuff works great right out of the box. Okay? When you need to sit on a drunk friend, or, a relative's having an emotional breakdown, etc., and you don't want to hurt them, but you got to stop the behavior.
Yep.
That's not self-defense. That's use of force.
Yep.
And for those scenarios, I tend to say that BJJ is awesome, right? However, doing a ground and pound out in the street is not so cool. Yep. And yeah, that's where, number one, there's not the safety equipment. There's a good chance of injury. But it is fighting. It is not creating a solution to the problem. It's beating the hell out of somebody.
Yeah.
And so they spend all this time training in the ring, and it's great, and they can do it on the mat, yay, but they don't know the context to use it outside of that, and that's where you can get in trouble.
One of the things I've seen with whether it's BJJ or other forms of ground fighting, people who are very much into that, is that when they make their claim for self-defense, I'm like, okay, that's one thing. But I point out that in many of the situations when you've achieved a dominant position, at that stage, not always, but in many cases, you have the opportunity to get up and get out there. And let's say that you don't feel safe enough. Okay, I'll accept that. That maybe like, okay, he's a big, strong guy. I'm afraid that he'll be able to hold me, or grab me and pull me back down. Okay, I get it. In many of the techniques that grappling systems are really good at, whether it's putting somebody in some sort of a joint lock or some sort of choke hold, you can get up then.
Yes.
Or you can manipulate him in such a way that he cannot reach you as you get up, and you can run away. That's self-defense. Right. Finishing the choke, finishing the lock. I'm not quite sure. If you have a prosecutor who's worth his salt, he's going to say, well, why did you break his arm? Why didn't you just get up? Well, but, okay, why did you choke him out and cause him brain damage? Because you choked him it took too long. Because you were under adrenal stress and you didn't realize that you were choking him 10 seconds longer than you normally would have. Mm-hmm. Why didn't you let him go beforehand? Well, but okay, time to go to jail now. And people think
Okay.
we're ragging on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or those kind of things. That's not the issue. It's context. It's understanding the difference between sports and outside of that realm.
Okay. I'm gonna cough. Sorry.
That's okay.
Picked up a crud. Back. Everything you said, yes. And the context of when to use BJJ,
Yeah.
you'll find usually it's best when you have some backup. It's not a solitary sport. I mean, one thing that my wife always joked about, oh, great, you got him in this wonderful hold. How are you going to call the cops? Right?
Yeah.
My hands are full, sorry. If you, like a cop controlling somebody, he handcuffs the guy, he calls backup. That is the backup. Say you've got a friend who's flipping out and you got to sit on him.
Yeah.
It really helps that you have other friends who are there, who are like there to help you when you've got them under control. Same thing with a family member flipping out. The presence of other people who, if they're not directly on your side, are not engaging too.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I have no problem going to the ground if I know I'm not going to get kicked to death.
Yeah.
Right? I'll sit there and it's like, yeah, I'll control you until you calm down, but everybody else is going, hey, you need to calm down too. That kind of backup, just the sheer context of doing it with people around you who are one of two categories, is a very, very important element for being able to use this safely.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, I mean, this applies to any other kind of technique that you might use. I mean, bystanders
Exactly.
are not per definition innocent bystanders. They can and will get involved in many cases, not necessarily on your behalf.
You noticed that, huh?
So you might want to take that into account. The issue with grappling systems is that as you're on the floor now, you are limited in how quickly you can get out of the way if that second person or multiple persons suddenly come for you. So it's
Right.
and I'm sure there's a bunch of BJJ guys who will listen to us saying this like, yeah, he doesn't understand. No, guys, I teach MMA, I teach grappling. I think it's awesome.
Right.
But it's the same discussion as if we're talking about, well, Muay Thai, it's the best striking system in the world because it's proven in the ring. I love Muay Thai, it's awesome. I just, been training somebody for months and he's off to Yokohama gym now, training with Sunshine, the world champ. So, I mean, I love that stuff. But it's this stupid kind of discussion where people look at the overlap again of that Venn diagram and are arguing as if we ever hear two carpenters argue about which is better, a hammer or a screwdriver or a saw. They don't. They're like, okay, you use this for this, you use this for this, and that's fine. You could use a screwdriver to hammer in a nail into a wall. It might work. For the folks listening, Mark just put up his hand and said, but how about we use a tool that is best for the job? And we can argue about what that tool needs to look like, but in any other field, people would say this is a given. And when it comes to self-defense and martial arts, people freak out. And I was like, okay, guys, you know what? Vaya con Dios, it's your life.
Yes. You left out the last word of VCDM. But yes, and it really is, go with God because nobody else is going to save you.
Yeah. Well, I think and I just want to bring it back to the book before we move on, is that I think the value of the book is that it helps people open up their mind to all the many factors that are involved, like you said, that will trip you up if you ever do have to defend yourself. That you many times you don't even consider them because that's not where your experience is at. If you live a life of violence, you know these factors because otherwise you don't survive.
Yeah.
But most people don't. So,
Right.
and the idea they have of self-defense, well, maybe that's not really accurate.
Well, and let's go back to something you and I both have in common, being a bouncer.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The idea of, okay, there's people who are on your side, there are people who are neutral, and there are people who are on the other guy's side.
Yeah.
That, they're going to jump in to help their friend. That makes sense to most people. What makes sense to a bouncer, however, is to add the fourth category, which is there's that guy who is on nobody's side but just decides to take a shot at you when you're down on the ground.
Yeah, I call them freebie seekers. They just want a freebie.
Yeah, and that really is. It's like, hey, check it out. Wham! He doesn't care who he's kicking. He's just getting a chance to kick somebody.
Yeah.
And that's a reality that, like, a BJJ guy, oh, yeah, we're trying to handle this. It's like, no, you really, you don't know about the freebie seekers. They are real. They are,
Yeah.
And that kind of understanding and knowing when to use BJJ, and I mean, to say that it's perfect for everything, any situation, no, that's not true. There are some very distinct circumstances where it works great, but you need to know when not to use it.
Yeah, totally agree with it. All right. Well, I want to move on because we still have the bonus episode to do, and I know you have a dinner in many hours, but I only have so many megabytes per month on my podcast host. No, what I want to say, I'll put the link in the show notes to the book. So everybody, I would very much recommend that you go check that out because I think it's a book that many people will find useful. I want to switch gears now and talk about safety concepts. So that's something that you've been doing for a little while now. Could you give a quick rundown of what safety concepts is?
Well, safety concepts is a blend between my knowledge and my partner, my co-author, Jenna Meek's knowledge. It's a varied approach to the three stages, but by varied I mean there's my background and also a guy's perspective. There's Jenna's background and a woman's perspective.
Yeah.
And the idea is to communicate missing information. And I say missing because we were talking earlier about the idea of the tip of the pyramid, that people want this answer, and they don't understand that it's all this other stuff that leads to that.
Yeah.
And what Jen and I have both noticed is, like, everybody wants to know about how to enforce their boundaries, but they don't understand what's involved in boundaries.
Yeah.
So how do you enforce something that you don't understand the subject? And our goal with Safety Concept is to bring into awareness, or up from, because there's a lot of subconscious awareness that we have. We know this stuff, but we don't consciously know it. So part of that is to bring up what you consciously know or subconsciously know, but to your consciousness, and then fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
So Safety Concepts is, if we were talking about the three different aspects, Safety Concepts is really understanding all the stages and how they interplay with each other.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do on our Patreon page is I have a series called Urban Awareness, which I'm going to kind of back reference this so people. It's basically the urban awareness class that I used to do at barbecue on video. So that means I go out and I show people the flora and fauna of the street, but also the type of circumstances where a mugging will happen, to how to recognize, like, a robbery spot.
Yeah.
Now, there's multiple types of robbery spot, but the general idea of a robbery spot is where somebody is going to position themselves and wait to find a victim that they can rob.
Yeah.
And that is, taking our existing knowledge and expanding it out. I don't know if you've heard of this, but somebody tried to mug me last year. Right? It was adorable. I'm going to the store. I'm going to the pharmacy to pick up drugs for my wife, and I see this guy lurking in a robbery spot. Okay. So I go in, I get the drugs, I come back out, and because I knew he was there, I looked over and I saw him. He was still there, and I saw his act. And then he started following me. Now, I consciously remember, shall we say, it was a, oh no, not going to happen response.
Yeah.
Right? And you knowing my language, you know how much I just cleaned that one up. But I flipped the switch, and I started turning to face this guy. And when I was oriented on him, he was bounding away like a deer with his little tail up. Right? Wrong target. Well, we took my original 5 stages of violent crime and expanded it out, because this guy actually never got within 50 feet of me. Right? And for those who don't know, my 5 stages of violent crime were how to identify when you're being set up for a robbery or any type of violent crime. But we played with this, and we discovered that from the time you come on the guy's radar to when you're looking down the barrel of a gun, you have about a minute.
Yeah.
All right. The 5 stages was the last 10 seconds. This guy, I saw him early enough, and again, we're going into the funnel of doom, which is not the official term for it. And I saw his behavior, and we timed it. We began to play with it, and we figured out you have about a minute. Now, you can't waste time feeling on your feelings. You have to be able to do something effective with the time you have.
Yeah.
And safety concepts is really oriented on teaching people that.
Yeah.
How to recognize what's happening, what is a counter that will work. If that counter doesn't work, the guy's more committed. And now you're able to explain. Now you're able to choose an appropriate level of force if you have to. And then afterwards, explain why that was the right decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I just want to say that you not only offer classes and videos, but you're also on Patreon. So, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But what can people find on your Patreon?
Well, right now, what we're doing is just getting as much knowledge out there as possible. We're trying to build the library, and we also deal with issues like boundaries, dealing with manipulative people, how to recognize you're in a situation and pick the appropriate response, dealing with the cops afterwards, dealing with the court system, what to expect when dealing with the legal system afterwards, which is, Tyler is true. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
Anytime Tyler survives, most of the time that Tyler survives, he ends up in jail because he screwed up. Right. And finally, we show him handling a situation correctly.
Yeah.
And that is the full process, but that's at the end of the book. So, a lot of this it's all the other information you need, not just for self-defense, but for conflict. And we're also doing the professional level courses where there's some serious problems with what professionals and organizations are teaching about this subject. And our primary thing is keeping the people safe while at the same time not leaving the organization open to be sued.
Yeah.
So, one of the problems that I really have is organizations who will give people half training, send them out into dangerous situations, and if they get hurt, well, okay, fine, we'll get somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's an incredibly high overturn, but, how do you approach something professionally when it's your job to engage, which is way different than a person who has an individual has the ability to get out of there. But with your job, and there's a lot of dynamics that are, again, overlapping. So, how do we teach like de-escalating. Well, I have a saying, which is negotiation without the ability to back it up is begging.
Yeah.
Right? Trying to de-escalate without having the physical deterrence is, you might as well pour ketchup on yourself and walk into lion's den. So safety concepts is pretty much everything else you need to know about this subject.
Yeah. All right. And so people can join the Patreon. You also offer courses to law enforcement, right. But do you also do civilians?
Yes.
All right. So and
a lot of
go ahead.
A lot of it is conflict management and the elements of what it takes to be able to de-escalate a situation, recognize when de-escalation isn't working, when avoidance isn't working, making the mental shift to the next level. Remember, as we're making okay, I'm here. I'm not going to try what works here anymore. This is what works at this level versus, oops, everything's gone sideways. I got to go.
Yeah.
And that's flip the switch and go is what I mean. The other thing we teach is when to stop.
Oh, good. Yeah. Critical skill.
Yeah. But one so often overlooked. Everybody's concerned about, well, how do I know when to go? How do I know when to go? It's just as important to know when to stop.
Yeah.
Because I believe we had one thing where we had Tyler chasing somebody down the street. And it's like, that's not self-defense anymore.
Yeah. This is one of the things that I teach a course, basic self-defense, just techniques for people who have no training background at all. And one of the things that is built into it is how to exit from the situation and just have a standard, have a procedure of, okay, this is what I do, and now it's time to get out of here. And okay, how do you do that, and so on. But that it needs to be built in. Like you said, everybody wants to develop that go button. Like, how can I go? Okay, yes, sure, we need that. And then once it's go time, you need techniques, you need stuff there. But you also need something that is, and now it is time to stop hitting that button and to do something else, namely getting out of there, stepping back, and not ending up with the murder charge on your back.
Right. I have a photo of an incident with a rocket. And what happened is you see the rocket you see the trail of smoke from the rocket as it's spiraling out. It turns out that in all the, everybody's working and doing the different jobs, part of it, somebody had left out of the program, of the coding, a stop command.
Yeah. That's a good way of seeing it.
Yeah, and so there's this, multi-million-dollar rocket, and they're kind of, well, okay, and they pushed the button. They had to blow it up.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, oops is right. But yeah, knowing when to stop is kind of important.
All right. Well, the website is safetyconcepts.net. So again, I'll put the link in the show notes, but people check that out. Whether it's civilian self-defense, civilian safety concepts, let's call it that. The training, the classes, but also law enforcement. Check that out. I think you'll like that. Mark, we are getting to the end of the first part, and that is the podcast that is available to everybody, and we are going to head into my bonus episode where Mark is going to answer questions from my patrons. So I'm going to stop recording for a bit and then do that. So if you want to check that out, go to patreon.com/Wim Demeere and click on the filter bonus episodes, and you'll find that. In the meantime, Mark, where can people reach you? How can they get in touch?
Well, I can be found through safetyconcepts.net. My own webpage is No Nonsense Self-Defense. My expert witness page is marcmacyoung.com, and of course I'm on Facebook. So there's all kinds of way to find me. But right. Mark with the C, MacYoung. I'm pretty easy to find.
All right. Okay, so a huge thanks already for this, Mark. We're going to slide on over to the bonus episode.
Thanks for listening to the Demeere podcast. For more information, go to www.wimsblog.com.